Hi, everybody. My name is Shauna, and this is the American English Podcast. My goal here is to teach you the English spoken in the United States through common expressions, pronunciation tips, and interesting cultural snippets or stories. I hope to keep this fun, useful, and interesting. Let's do it. One of the most popular films of 1997 was by far Titanic. It won 11 Academy Awards, and if you saw the film or even just previews of it, you probably know the plot. There's a love story between Kate Winslet, Rose, and Leonardo DiCaprio, Jack, that develops while aboard a huge ship called Titanic. The Titanic was a real ship that set off on its first transatlantic trip from England to the United States in 1912. I know you know what happens. The ship hits an iceberg and sinks. I thought about retelling this story, and I know English speakers would tell me, "Oh, Shauna, really? That ship has sailed." Literally, that ship has sailed is an expression that means that the opportunity has Atlantic trip. This topic England is no longer to the United States or as exciting as English speakers would tell me because it's been talked about Shauna, way too many times. That ship I still find it interesting, but many would say literally that ship has sailed is an expression. Instead of doing my long cultural lesson, I've decided to change it up. This topic is no longer a summary of the Titanic, and I know in the story will hear me because irregular verbs Shauna way too many times. That tense. Pay attention and see how many of these irregular verbs you hear. I've taught over 3,000 language classes to intermediate English learners, and even when people speak well, they might not switch back and forth between tenses quickly or remember an irregular past tense form when the moment arises that they need to use it. Now, listening to a story is more exciting, in my opinion, than memorizing verb lists. It's more engaging, more memorable, and of course, we want to remember vocabulary. So let me know what you think about this. You can write to me on Instagram at American English Podcast, on Spotify in their comments section, or even on YouTube if you watch the video version of this audio. Before we get to the lesson, some of you might be wondering, what do you mean by irregular verbs? In English, we decide whether a verb is regular or irregular based on its form in the past tense. Regular verbs in English have ed endings in the past. For example, it was cold outside, so I changed into warm clothes. Changed is a regular past tense verb. It ends in ed. Changed. In December, my family moved to North Carolina. Moved is a regular past tense verb. Once again, it ends in ed. This is not rocket science. It's fairly simple. Now, irregular verbs, so the opposite of regular verbs, don't have ed endings in the simple past tense. Anything other than ed as an ending is irregular. Yesterday, my daughter drank a glass of milk before bed. Drank. Last week, I ate a big cheeseburger and got a stomachache. Ate and got are irregular. They don't end in ed. You get the point. Most of you probably feel confident with the most common irregular past tense verbs. Let's test you. What is the past tense of go? Went. I went to the supermarket at 3 p.m. What is the past tense of sleep? Slept. I slept poorly last night because my daughter kept waking me up. How about to read? Do you know the past tense of to read? Read. Yes, it's spelled the same as read, but we just pronounce it differently. Read. The last book I read was in German. Now, if you got those right, you deserve a big round of applause. Let's see how you do in the next 5 minutes. Without further ado, let's begin the story. In this lesson, we'll start by doing a listen and read exercise. The story is, of course, the Titanic. Then we'll do a review of the 10 irregular verbs you heard in the story. In part 3, we'll do an exercise. You'll need to fill in the blank with the correct past tense form of the verb. Last but not least, we'll listen again. This will be helpful for retention of new vocab. Let's begin. In the spring of 1912, the Titanic, a majestic ship, set sail from Southampton, England, heading towards New York City. Passengers who rode the ship were amazed by its grandeur. The Titanic was known for its extravagant amenities, including grand staircases, ornate dining rooms, a gymnasium, a swimming pool, and lavish first-class accommodations. Lavish just means fancy. However, the magnificent voyage lasted only until the fateful night of April 14, 1912, when tragedy struck. The Titanic had been sailing smoothly through the icy, calm water when suddenly it hit a colossal iceberg. Colossal means massive or huge. As icy seawater poured into the lower levels of the ship, a wave of panic spread among the passengers. Over the next few hours, many came to the realization that the ship would sink. Amidst the chaos, passengers desperately sought refuge in the limited number of lifeboats. In spite of the ship's size, there were only enough lifeboats for about half of the passengers. Those who couldn't secure a place jumped into the chilly ocean water, some with life vests, some without. They swam in place until most of them froze to death. The unsinkable Titanic sank less than 3 hours after it collided with the iceberg, killing 1,500 passengers and crew members. The sinking of the Titanic prompted immediate changes in maritime safety regulations. It's a tragic reminder of how fragile humans are against the unpredictable nature of the ocean. So, what were the 10 irregular verbs? Did you catch them? Let's go through them one by one. The first one is to set. In the past tense, it doesn't change. It remains set. In the spring of 1912, the Titanic, a majestic ship, set sail from Southampton, England, heading towards New York City. To set sail means to start a voyage on water. Ships set sail, boats set sail when they're headed a certain direction, when they start moving. Let me give you 2 more examples. She set the table for dinner last night. He set his watch on his dresser before bed. The second one was to ride. In the past tense, it's rode. Passengers who rode the ship were amazed by its grandeur. He rode his bike to school every day when he was younger. I rode my bike to work this morning. Number 3. To strike, in the past, is struck. The magnificent voyage lasted only until the fateful night of April 14, 1912, when tragedy struck. The thunderstorm struck the town with intense lightning. It struck me as strange that he dyed his hair bright green. Kind of a weird example. Number 4, to hit. To hit, in the past, is hit. The Titanic had been sailing smoothly through the icy, calm water when suddenly it hit a colossal iceberg. She hit the center of the target with her arrow. I accidentally hit the woman with my purse yesterday. Number 5, to spread in the past tense is spread. As icy seawater poured into the lower levels of the ship, a wave of panic spread among the passengers. For lunch, I made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I spread peanut butter and jelly on the bread. Sickness spread so quickly in the preschool classroom. Number 6, to come in the past is came. Over the next few hours, many came to the realization that the ship would sink. The students were very smart. English came to them easily. My friends came to my house last night for drinks. Number 7, to seek in the past is sought, right? To seek means to look for. It's very common to use seek also with refuge. It means to find a secure or safe spot. Amidst the chaos, passengers desperately sought refuge in the limited number of lifeboats. They sought refuge from the storm in a nearby shelter. After their English teacher resigned, the students sought out a new teacher, or searched for a new teacher. Number 8, to swim in the past is swam. Those who couldn't secure a place jumped into the chilly ocean water, some with life vests, some without. They swam in place until most of them froze to death. To swim in place means to move one's arms and legs to remain afloat, but not necessarily to travel to another location. You remain in the same spot while staying afloat. Let's do 2 more examples. We swam in the lake until sunset. I swam in a pool yesterday. Number 9, to freeze in the past is froze. They swam in place until most of them froze to death. I put water in the freezer and it froze. The cold weather froze the lake solid. Number 10, to sink in the past is sank. The unsinkable Titanic sank less than 3 hours after it collided with the iceberg. The coins we threw sank to the bottom of the fountain. The old ship sank to the bottom of the ocean. All right, let's go ahead and do the quiz. Fill in the blank with the correct past tense form. Number 1, yesterday the sun at 7:30 p.m. What is the past tense conjugation of to set? Set. Same. Yesterday the sun set at 7:30 p.m. Number 2, the girl her horse through a field of flowers. What's the past tense of to ride? Do you remember? Rode. The girl rode her horse through a field of flowers. Number 3, lightning the old oak tree during the thunderstorm. What is the past tense of to strike? Struck. Lightning struck the old oak tree during the thunderstorm. Number 4, Michael Phelps and his team all day. What's the past tense of to swim? Swam. Michael Phelps and his team swam all day. Number 5, the ship slowly beneath the waves, disappearing from view. What's the past tense of to sink? sank. The ship slowly sank beneath the waves, disappearing from view. Number 6. The hungry woman butter on her toast before adding jam. What's the past tense of to spread? Spread. The hungry woman spread butter on her toast before adding jam. Number 7. In yesterday's game, Tom the baseball out of the park. What's the past tense of to hit? Hit. It remains the same. In yesterday's game, Tom hit the baseball out of the park. Number 8. The cold weather the pond, turning it into a sheet of ice. What's the past tense of to freeze? The cold weather froze the pond, turning it into a sheet of ice. Number 9. She to the party late, but she still had a great time. What is the past tense of to come? Came. She came to the party late, but she still had a great time. Number 10. They refuge from the storm in a nearby shelter. What's the past tense of to seek? Sought. S-O-U-G-H-T. They sought refuge from the storm in a nearby shelter. Let's hear the story one last time. In the spring of 1912, the Titanic, a majestic ship, set sail from Southampton, England, heading towards New York City. Passengers who rode the ship were amazed by its grandeur. The Titanic was known for its extravagant amenities, including grand staircases, ornate dining rooms, a gymnasium, a swimming pool, and lavish first-class accommodations. Lavish just means fancy. However, the magnificent voyage lasted only until the fateful night of April 14, 1912, when tragedy struck. The Titanic had been sailing smoothly through the icy, calm water when suddenly it hit a colossal iceberg. Colossal means massive or huge. As icy seawater poured into the lower levels of the ship, a wave of panic spread among the passengers. Over the next few hours, many came to the realization that the ship would sink. Amidst the chaos, passengers desperately sought refuge in the limited number of lifeboats. In spite of the ship's size, there were only enough lifeboats for about half of the passengers. Those who couldn't secure a place jumped into the chilly ocean water, some with life vests, some without. They swam in place until most of them froze to death. The unsinkable Titanic sank less than 3 hours after it collided with the iceberg, killing 1,500 passengers and crew members. The sinking of the Titanic prompted immediate changes in maritime safety regulations. It's a tragic reminder of how fragile humans are against the unpredictable nature of the ocean. Before we wrap up today's lesson, I did want to share one thing about the Titanic that you might not know, about someone you might not know. One of the most famous, if not the most famous, survivors was a woman named Margaret Brown, or more commonly known as Molly Brown. She was on lifeboat number 6, and she gained fame for how brave and outspoken she was in the aftermath of the Titanic hitting the iceberg. Now, she was on her own. She was healthy, both mentally and physically. And so when she saw disaster, she stood up and decided she wanted to help. She pushed the women and 2 men in her lifeboat to save others. She also kept everyone optimistic. And she spoke foreign languages, so she was able to console many of them. She was able to make the mood, the vibe of that lifeboat a little bit more upbeat because, of course, a lot of people hit rock bottom. Many women, quote, had lost everything: husbands, children, clothes, money, and valuables, and needed to start a life in a new country. That country, of course, being the United States. Now, her lifeboat and others made it to Carpathia, which was a rescue boat nearby, somewhat nearby. At last, they were safe. Once again, Molly saw this as an opportunity. While on board, Molly talked to all of the first-class passengers and got them to donate money to the less fortunate. By the time Carpathia made it to the United States, Molly Brown had gathered $10,000 to help those who'd lost it all. Molly was an activist, a philanthropist, and she was smart and well-spoken. Her account of what happened on the Titanic was published for the world to read. I'll read you a few snippets from the New York Herald, which was one of the first accounts of her story. Molly said, quote, "I stretched on the brass bed at the side of which was a lamp. So completely absorbed in my reading, I gave little thought to the crash that struck at my window overhead and threw me to the floor. After falling to the floor, Molly could hear commotion in the hallway. Quote, I again looked out and saw a man whose face was blanched. That means whitened. His eyes protruding. Protruding means sticking out. So very, very wide. Wearing the look of a haunted creature. He was gasping for breath. And in an undertone, he gasped, "Get your lifesaver." A lifesaver is the round or circular device that you use around your waist, or maybe you hold on to it in order to stay afloat in water. Molly was then placed by 2 men in a lifeboat. She was not one of the 1,500 people who died in the wake of the crash. She lived, and she told the world about the band that continued to play as the ship went under. Just as we saw in the movie Titanic, we saw her on her lifeboat at the end of the movie, and it showed her as she encouraged others to go back and save more people. Now, in any case, it's pretty inspirational how one person can help so many others mentally, financially, and Molly Brown became known as the unsinkable Molly Brown. You can visit her house and the museum dedicated to her in Denver, Colorado. Definitely worth checking out if you're there. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Check out the episode notes for the link to the YouTube video and the transcript, and be sure to sign up to Season 4 if you want the PDFs for the transcript, worksheet, quiz, and more. Hope you're having a nice day, and until next time, bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the American English Podcast. Remember, it's my goal here to not only help you improve your listening comprehension, but to show you how to speak like someone from the States. If you want to receive the full transcript for this episode, or you just want to support this podcast, make sure to sign up to premium content on AmericanEnglishPodcast.com. Thanks, and hope to see you soon. Maybe it's fall in some places and spring here. In any case, let's get to today's lesson. This is going to be a 2-part lesson. In part 1, which is the episode you're currently listening to, I'll tell you a joke, we'll do some pronunciation exercises, and we'll go through the very common expression to hit rock bottom. In part 2, which will be posted soon, we'll use the story of Titanic as a canvas to work on irregular verbs. It's not a typical long culture lesson like I normally have in part 2. And I think it's just better that way because I think you know the story of the Titanic already. You know the majestic ship, the one that hit an iceberg and sank to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. So in part 2, the lesson is going to focus more on grammar. It's an experiment and I think it's pretty cool. I can't wait to hear what you think, so stay tuned for that. Before we get to today's lesson, I'd like to do a recap. Last month, I posted episode 162 about reduplications, which are phrases like super duper, handy dandy, and lovey dovey. In English, we often say these things to give a playful and poetic effect to the way we speak. I think they're fun. So I asked you, all of you on Spotify, they have a polls section now, and I posted a poll asking if reduplications exist in your native language. Over 1,000 of you responded, and 67% said yes, which is really cool. Rabuno Wu wrote that gadka szmatka means chit-chat in Polish. Jutta Kempf wrote that in German, they also use mishmash and pee-pee like in English. And she came up with a bunch of other reduplications. One that I particularly liked was krimskrams, which are like odds and ends in English, little random miscellaneous objects. We have a drawer in our house filled with odds and ends, or as you say in German, krimskrams. Excuse my pronunciation, by the way. Amir said in Persian, or Farsi, it's very common, quote, you can do it with almost every word, and most of the times it's with the letter M. Some are dava mava, fight, kacholo mocholo, a little, tala mala, meaning gold. I could keep going. It was so fun reading through all of your examples in so many different languages. Thank you for everyone taking the time to write. I'd also like to give one big shout out to Fernando from Rio, who sent $15 worth of coffee to me and said that I made learning reduplications, quote, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Well, Fernando, thank you so much. I'm not sure where you learned easy peasy lemon squeezy. That's so funny. I'd forgotten about that one. And it's a perfect example of a reduplication. Easy peasy lemon squeezy means easy. Let's go ahead and begin today's episode. And as usual, we'll start with a joke. Are you ready? What do you call a rock that never goes to school? Do you know? A skipping stone. Do you get it? To skip school means to intentionally avoid attending class or school activities without permission or a valid excuse. Lucas used to skip school a lot. I didn't. A skipping stone, however, is a flat, smooth stone that is thrown horizontally across the surface of a body of water, such as a pond, lake, or river, in a way that it bounces or skips along the water multiple times before sinking. Lucas can make a stone skip about 10 times before it sinks. It's pretty impressive, if I must say so. So you hear the wordplay in this joke. Let's hear it one more time. What do you call a rock that never goes to school? A skipping stone. I know some of you don't think these jokes are funny. That's okay. Explaining a joke always kind of ruins it, in my opinion. But the point is, we're learning double meanings of words. It's a learning experience, even if you don't find it funny. On another note, there are a few other ways to say to skip school or to skip class. Some people say to play hooky. My dad always says that. Or if you go to school in the morning, but for some reason you don't go to class and you don't have a good reason for it, we'd say you ditched class. To ditch or skip class are sort of synonymous. Let's move to the expression of the day, which is to hit rock bottom. This expression is extremely common. We'll start by going through the definitions of each word. To hit is a verb, and generally it means to strike with force. I just hit my palm with my other hand. It can also mean to come into contact forcefully with someone or something. I accidentally hit the woman with my purse. All right, rock is a noun, and it's the same as stone, really. It's a hard, solid substance, often made of minerals. For example, granite, sandstone, and limestone. We stopped by the river and ate lunch on a big rock. Rocks can vary in size and in their appearance. You might have igneous rocks or metamorphic rocks, sedimentary rocks. I think those are the three I remember from my geology classes in college. Bottom is the lowest point or part, the base or lowest part of something. It's the opposite of top. I found my missing sock at the bottom of my daughter's drawer. To hit rock bottom as an expression has been used for centuries. Imagine if you look into a hole in the ground and see rock at the bottom. If you hit rock bottom, you can't go any lower. As an expression, to hit rock bottom is used when one reaches the lowest possible point in one's life or in a situation. When someone hits rock bottom, they may feel like they have reached the worst condition they've ever been in. Maybe they're experiencing extreme adversity, financial or emotional despair, maybe a physical hardship, or maybe a failure, a company failure, a life failure. Whatever the situation is, it can feel very overwhelming. When someone hits rock bottom, it gives the idea that the only way to go is up. So for many, it can be a turning point. It may force someone to reevaluate their circumstances and make positive changes in their life. Let's go through some examples to see how you can use this in different contexts. Example number 1. Before creating the iconic Disney brand, Walt Disney faced numerous setbacks and failures. One of his lowest points came when he was fired from a newspaper company for lacking creativity. But it was when his first animation company went bankrupt that Walt Disney hit rock bottom. After struggling to find success in California, he eventually created Mickey Mouse with the help of UB Iwerks and established Disney Studios. The rest is history, right? So he hit rock bottom in that moment of failure, but it was also a turning point for him, right? Great things came after he persevered. Example number 2. Oprah Winfrey is an American talk show host, actress, producer, philanthropist. She's everything. But before becoming famous, Oprah endured a difficult childhood. She was impoverished and abused. In fact, she admitted that she considered suicide when she was impregnated by her uncle at 14.
At 14 or whatever, where you end up with your father.
I hit rock bottom,
Yeah.
actually. I hit rock bottom. I became pregnant.
By the uncle? Or,
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I became pregnant and hid the pregnancy. I'd intended to kill myself, actually.
It was the lowest point in her life, but she pushed through it. and eventually Oprah created the Oprah Winfrey Show, which became one of the most successful television programs in U.S. history. Example number 3. In the fall of 2015, I hit rock bottom. My business partners and I agreed that our language business had failed. So mentally, I wasn't very happy. Then, as if the universe wanted to make things worse, I had a severe allergic reaction to mango, the peel of mango specifically. I was living in South America at the time, and there was a big mango tree in my backyard. I didn't think the reaction would be so bad. At the same time, I got Zika. Remember that mosquito virus? Yeah, I tested positive for that. And then to top it all off, the roof on the little shack or building I was in collapsed in the night, and rain poured on top of me and all of my stuff. This was all in the same week. I hit rock bottom. Honestly, it was a very hard time in my life. And I remember thinking, what in the world am I going to do now? Of course, I'm still alive. It was actually a turning point for me too. It's when I met Lucas. I think in those moments when we hit rock bottom, it's hard to imagine things getting better. I mean, some people might fall into a deep depression and need some sort of therapy to get out of the pit that they're in. But the point is to remember that there is a way out and there's always light at the end of the tunnel. It just might take a while to find it. So let's go ahead and do the pronunciation exercise. We'll use the phrase, I think I just hit rock bottom. Repeat after me. I think. I think I just hit. I think I just hit rock bottom. I think I just hit rock bottom. And the conjugation. I hit rock bottom. You hit rock bottom. He hit rock bottom. She hit rock bottom. It hit rock bottom. We hit rock bottom. They hit rock bottom. Hit. Hit. Say this after me. Hit. 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 In most situations, if I'm speaking at a normal speed, you won't hear the T at the end of my hit. 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 My teeth don't even touch. Hit. Let me read some sentences for you. He hit me with the ball. He hit He hit me with the ball. Hit me with the ball. He hit me with the ball. I accidentally hit the woman with my purse. I accidentally hit the woman with my purse. Hit the. Hit the. Hit the. Hit the. Hit the. I accidentally hit the woman with my purse. The boxer hit the punching bag. The boxer hit the punching bag. Pronouncing the T at the ends of words for some native speakers feels like extra work, particularly when a consonant follows. It slows down the sentence, so instead many choose to use a glottal stop, as I just did. It's when I push air out of my mouth and stop. Hit, hit, hit. Try laughing with me. Hit, 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 hit. Right? If you push the air out and you stop it. I don't think it's 100% necessary for all of you to get rid of the T's at the ends of words. That's not the point in teaching this. The point is, It's really common in native speech. And having that awareness that we do this can help with your comprehension. I know it's challenging to be able to create the glottal stop. The first step is recognizing it. So pay attention to the T's at the ends of words. That's it for this episode. If you liked it, I would love if you could give a 5-star review in your favorite podcast player. Don't forget to subscribe to get notified about upcoming episodes. And as always, if you would like to learn more with every podcast episode, check out premium content. It is designed to help you learn with this podcast. Links can be found in the episode notes. Hope you're having a nice day, and stay tuned until the next episode, all about irregular verbs and the Titanic. Have a good day. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the American English Podcast. Remember, it's my goal here to not only help you improve your listening comprehension, but to show you how to speak like someone from the States. If you want to receive the full transcript for this episode, or you just want to support this podcast, make sure to sign up to premium content on AmericanEnglishPodcast.com. Thanks, and hope to see you soon. Hi, everybody. My name is Shauna, and this is the American English Podcast. My goal here is to teach you the English spoken in the United States through common expressions, pronunciation tips, and interesting cultural snippets or stories. I hope to keep this fun, useful, and interesting. Let's do it. Visiting the post office in the United States can be both a chore and a new experience to practice English. In this 5-minute English lesson, you are going to hear a true story about my grandma. I'll use her true story as a canvas to expose you to a bunch of new vocabulary related to this topic. By the end, you will be prepared for your next trip to the U.S. Post Office and for any situation in which you need vocabulary related to mail, sending letters and cards, packages, and anything in that realm. So this is a topic-specific lesson. It will be advanced. Don't worry though, I've created a full lesson that goes alongside this audio to help you out. The supplementary lesson contains an image sheet with pictures of all of the key vocabulary discussed, a video for you with those images to practice your pronunciation, as well as many exercises and quizzes. As a language learner myself, this will be incredibly useful not only for the comprehension side of learning, but for the retention side as well. We all want to remember what we learned, right? You'll find the links for the premium content in the episode notes. I think a lot of you will relate to this story. If you do, I'd love to hear from you. You can write a comment on Spotify. You can write to me on Instagram at American English Podcast. Or, I'm so excited about this one, you can send me a real postcard. Yes, real mail, real post. I want to decorate my wall in my office with postcards from you guys. I got this idea from my friend Pete, and I want to use it as sort of a reminder why I create this podcast. It's because of all of you, and I'm excited to see if I receive anything. So stay tuned to hear the address. It's at the end of this episode, and you can also find it in the episode notes. Without any further ado, I'll begin with an introduction. Then you'll hear the 5-minute English episode with all of the intensely topic-specific vocabulary. And then at the very end, you're going to hear the recording one more time. Don't miss listening to it the second time around, that is going to be a great way to pick up vocabulary you didn't pick up the first time, reinforce the words that you understood from context. Just listen to the end, all right? My grandma, Maria, was Spanish. She was born and raised in Spain in a small town called Sonseca in Castilla-La Mancha, or should I say, the land of Don Quixote. Sonseca is small. It's teeny tiny. I mean, it's to the point everyone knows everyone on the streets. For some, that familiarity sounds like a dream. For others, it's a nightmare. My grandma, well, she wasn't meant for a small town. In English, she was what we'd call a big fish in a small pond, meaning her dreams and ambitions didn't fit in a town of a few thousand with not much to do. She had an adventurous spirit and a travel bug. So at the age of 19, she left and became an au pair in Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States. Au pair is a French loanword we use in English. It's essentially a nanny, someone who lives with a family and takes care of the kids. She was an au pair for an American family who taught her about the culture of the United States, and they helped her master English as a second language. She loved English. So after returning to Europe, she used English as a tour guide in Madrid and spent her days sharing Spanish culture with Americans. One day, she met a very tall Michigander, my grandpa. Together, they traveled the world, got married, and had kids. The point is, they eventually settled in the U.S., far, far from Spain. You may be wondering, what does this have to do with the post office? Get to the point. Hold your horses. I'm getting to it. So my grandma's story sounds like a typical international love story, right? But what Hollywood doesn't tell you about international love stories is that they're bittersweet. There are always friends and family members left behind. My grandma was one of 6 girls, and as she got older, she craved a stronger connection with them. The problem was, international flights to Spain were not in the family budget. International calls were too expensive and reserved for special occasions like Mother's Day and birthdays. Email didn't exist yet, so she wrote. She wrote postcards and letters. She sent pictures of her kids and eventually her grandkids. In her lifetime, the United States Postal Service was her lifeline to the people she'd left overseas. Let's begin this 5-minute English lesson. My grandma permanently moved to the United States from Spain in the 1950s. And the only way she could afford to keep in contact with friends and family was through writing letters. Flying and international calls back then were not in her family's budget. In a way, it's sort of sad. Sending letters through the USPS, the United States Postal Service, is called snail mail for a reason. In comparison to email, which can be sent and received in seconds, letters can take a while to arrive. Waiting for snail mail, so standard post or standard mail, led to a lot of anticipation. When the mailman brought my grandma handwritten correspondence or letters from her sisters, she was thrilled, and rightfully so. Unlike junk mail, ads, or flyers that fill up our mailboxes and end up in the trash, personal letters are meaningful. They require thought and time to create. Don't handwritten letters make you feel special? My grandma was on a mission to make her sisters and mother feel extra special. After all, this was pretty much the only way they communicated. So she bought beautiful stationery, such as decorative paper, pretty envelopes, stickers, and nice ink pens to make her letters look pretty. She didn't do calligraphy with an ink pot and quill, but she wrote her messages in cursive, so with beautiful, connected letters. Her handwriting was a sign of the times. Back then, penmanship classes were a thing. Today, however, many Americans write in print, each letter separate from the next. Even though print is more legible, it's easier to read, cursive looks more elegant, doesn't it? My grandma wrote her messages in cursive. After she filled lined paper or her beautiful stationery with stories about her life in the U.S., she folded the sheets nicely and placed them in an envelope. Then she would address the envelope to the recipient, either her mother or one of her sisters. Under their name, she would write out the delivery address, and up in the corner, she would write the return address in case the letter got lost in the mail. As a kid, I noticed how those Spanish delivery addresses looked different from what I was used to. In the U.S., we typically use only 3 or 4 lines when we address an envelope. On the first line, we write someone's first and last name, perhaps their title if it's a formal letter, such as Miss, Mrs., Mr., or maybe even Doctor. On the second line, we write the street address. The street number always comes first. For example, the first Starbucks in the world is at 1912 Pike Place. If there's a suite number or apartment number, it goes after the street name. On the third line, we write the city, the state abbreviation, and the zip code. Starbucks is in Seattle, WA for Washington, 98101. The zip code, those numbers at the end, always go last. 3 simple lines. If we're sending something overseas, then we'll add the country on a 4th line. USPS was created in 1775, and today it's an independent agency of the U.S. government. For the past 10 years or so, they've worked with companies like Amazon and UPS to help deliver packages. One promise they make is to deliver post anywhere in the United States, no matter how remote. Yet, some people who live in Timbuktu might get a P.O. box, a post office box, which is a locked mailbox in a post office. That's to ensure their mail arrives safely. The U.S. Post Office offers other services as well. They can file a change of address for you. They can get you a money order, which is great if you don't have a U.S. bank account and you need to pay someone by check. At some locations, you can even apply for a passport. But what they're most famous for is mail. How do you send mail in the U.S.? Well, mail can be dropped in a big blue collection box. You'll see them around town. They can also be mailed directly from home. My grandma lived in a house, and like many houses in the U.S., she had a mailbox out front. Whenever she wanted to send a letter, she set it inside the mailbox and raised the red flag on the side to let the mailman know there was outgoing mail. She didn't live in an apartment building, but if she had, there might have been a communal area with a slot to leave letters. Every letter, of course, regardless of where it's sent, needs a stamp, which is a small, square, or rectangular-shaped sticker placed on the corner of an envelope to show you've paid for that letter to be delivered. My grandma always kept a booklet of first-class forever stamps on hand, which is smart. Once you have them, they retain their full value forever. Traditional snail mail isn't always ideal. If something is time-sensitive or urgent, it'd be smart to head to the post office to take advantage of their priority mail options, which come with insurance, tracking, and a speedy delivery time. If you're sending important documents and want proof of mailing and delivery, you can send certified mail. That's common with legal documents. On occasion, my grandma sent care packages to Spain, filled with treats and homemade gifts. She'd buy her shipping supplies directly at the post office. They have packing tape and cardboard boxes, bubble wrap and padded envelopes, all to make sure your fragile items don't break in transit. When she was done packing up her care package, she didn't stick 100 stamps on the front. She bought postage. Who knows how much she spent on postage back then? International shipping rates have increased significantly in the past 50 to 75 years. Actually, a lot has changed in that time. Today, we have technology and we don't need letters. We don't need postcards and nice stationery to communicate with friends and family that we love. We can send a text or an email, but that's exactly why I think we should send letters through the mail, through regular post, snail mail, whatever you want to call it. You know someone really cares for you if they send you a handwritten letter. Am I right? You can be the one to do it. That's the end of this extra long 5-minute English episode. I get carried away sometimes, but I hope you don't mind. I got a little emotional thinking about my grandma waiting for the mailman, that look of excitement on her face, thinking that she might get a letter from her sisters or her mom, and how disappointed she probably was when there wasn't a letter. Maybe there wasn't that much drama in real life. Maybe I'm just inventing these visuals in my head. In any case, I just want you guys to think about the people that live far, maybe send them a letter. Think about it. Anyway, my grandma and I were kindred spirits. Very, very similar. On that note, if you want to help me decorate my wall with a postcard from your country, maybe from the city you live in, I'd be over the moon to receive your postcard in my P.O. box. I'd be so happy. You can write to me, Shauna Thompson, on the first line, S-H-A-N-A, last name Thompson, T-H-O-M-P-S-O-N, second line, P.O. Box 9074, third line, Asheville, NC 28815. And remember, on the fourth line, you put the country. So United States, if you are currently living outside of the United States. I'll also put the address in the episode notes. I'm going to play the audio one last time. Remember, this is advanced, so don't be discouraged if you don't understand everything. Do the best you can. If you want an image sheet with pictures of the challenging words, a pronunciation video, the annotated text with downloadable files, then check the links in the episode notes for the premium content or visit AmericanEnglishPodcast.com. Let's hear the audio one last time. Here we go. My grandma permanently moved to the United States from Spain in the 1950s. And the only way she could afford to keep in contact with friends and family was through writing letters. Flying and international calls back then were not in her family's budget. In a way, it's sort of sad. Sending letters through the USPS, the United States Postal Service, is called snail mail for a reason. In comparison to email, which can be sent and received in seconds, letters can take a while to arrive. Waiting for snail mail, so standard post or standard mail, led to a lot of anticipation. When the mailman brought my grandma handwritten correspondence or letters from her sisters, she was thrilled, and rightfully so. Unlike junk mail, ads, or flyers that fill up our mailboxes and end up in the trash, personal letters are meaningful. They require thought and time to create. Don't handwritten letters make you feel special? My grandma was on a mission to make her sisters and mother feel extra special. After all, this was pretty much the only way they communicated. So she bought beautiful stationery, such as decorative paper, pretty envelopes, stickers, and nice ink pens to make her letters look pretty. She didn't do calligraphy with an ink pot and quill, but she wrote her messages in cursive, so with beautiful, connected letters. Her handwriting was a sign of the times. Back then, penmanship classes were a thing. Today, however, many Americans write in print, each letter separate from the next. Even though print is more legible, it's easier to read, cursive looks more elegant, doesn't it? My grandma wrote her messages in cursive. After she filled lined paper or her beautiful stationery with stories about her life in the U.S., she folded the sheets nicely and placed them in an envelope. Then she would address the envelope to the recipient, either her mother or one of her sisters. Under their name, she would write out the delivery address, and up in the corner, she would write the return address in case the letter got lost in the mail. As a kid, I noticed how those Spanish delivery addresses looked different from what I was used to. In the U.S., we typically use only 3 or 4 lines when we address an envelope. On the first line, we write someone's first and last name, perhaps their title if it's a formal letter, such as Miss, Mrs., Mr., or maybe even Doctor. On the second line, we write the street address. The street number always comes first. For example, the first Starbucks in the world is at 1912 Pike Place. If there's a suite number or apartment number, it goes after the street name. On the third line, we write the city, the state abbreviation, and the zip code. Starbucks is in Seattle, WA for Washington, 98101. The zip code, those numbers at the end, always go last. 3 simple lines. If we're sending something overseas, then we'll add the country on a 4th line. USPS was created in 1775. And today, it's an independent agency of the U.S. government. For the past 10 years or so, they've worked with companies like Amazon and UPS to help deliver packages. One promise they make is to deliver post anywhere in the United States, no matter how remote. Yet, some people who live in Timbuktu might get a P.O. box, a post office box, which is a locked mailbox in a post office. That's to ensure their mail arrives safely. The U.S. Post Office offers other services as well. They can file a change of address for you. They can get you a money order, which is great if you don't have a U.S. bank account and you need to pay someone by check. At some locations, you can even apply for a passport. But what they're most famous for is mail. How do you send mail in the U.S.? Well, mail can be dropped in a big blue collection box. You'll see them around town. that can also be mailed directly from home. My grandma lived in a house, and like many houses in the U.S., she had a mailbox out front. Whenever she wanted to send a letter, she set it inside the mailbox and raised the red flag on the side to let the mailman know there was outgoing mail. She didn't live in an apartment building, but if she had, there might have been a communal area with a slot to leave letters. Every letter, of course, regardless of where it's sent, needs a stamp, which is a small, square or rectangular-shaped sticker placed on the corner of an envelope to show you've paid for that letter to be delivered. My grandma always kept a booklet of first-class forever stamps on hand, which is smart. Once you have them, they retain their full value forever. Traditional snail mail isn't always ideal. If something is time-sensitive or urgent, it'd be smart to head to the post office to take advantage of their priority mail options, which come with insurance, tracking, and a speedy delivery time. If you're sending important documents and want proof of mailing and delivery, you can send certified mail. That's common with legal documents. On occasion, my grandma sent care packages to Spain, filled with treats and homemade gifts. She'd buy her shipping supplies directly at the post office. They have packing tape and cardboard boxes, bubble wrap and padded envelopes, all to make sure your fragile items don't break in transit. When she was done packing up her care package, she didn't stick 100 stamps on the front. She bought postage. Who knows how much she spent on postage back then? International shipping rates have increased significantly in the past 50 to 75 years. Actually, a lot has changed in that time. Today, we have technology and we don't need letters. We don't need postcards and nice stationery to communicate with friends and family that we love. We can send a text or an email, but that's exactly why I think we should send letters through the mail, through regular post, snail mail, whatever you want to call it. You know someone really cares for you if they send you a handwritten letter. Am I right? You can be the one to do it. All right, that's it. Thanks for tuning in. I have one last challenging question for you. What travels around the world and stays in the corner? Do you know? A stamp. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the American English Podcast. Remember, it's my goal here to not only help you improve your listening comprehension, but to show you how to speak like someone from the States. If you want to receive the full transcript for this episode, or you just want to support this podcast, make sure to sign up to premium content on AmericanEnglishPodcast.com. Thanks and hope to see you soon. Illinois is situated in the heart of the American Midwest, and it's a charming mix of city life and rural landscapes. It's known as the Prairie State because of its vast expanses of flat land. Over 60% of the state is covered in farmland, so agriculture plays a significant role in Illinois' economy. They're known for their production of crops like corn and soybeans. Now, there are a few natural wonders in this state, one being Starved Rock State Park, where ancient sandstone canyons and waterfalls await visitors. But what attracts most out-of-towners is, of course, the vibrant city of Chicago, also known as the Windy City. Depending on the year, Chicago ranks as the third or fourth largest city in the U.S. There are a lot of people and there's lots to do. Of course, it's situated on the scenic shore of Lake Michigan, so it's beautiful. Chicago is also a hot spot for art enthusiasts. It's not only home to world-class museums and iconic architecture, it's also the home city of today's guest, Jackie Katzis, who is an ESL teacher and a well-known YouTuber from the channel Ask Jackie. We'll begin today's episode by getting to know this wonderful Chicagoan, and then we'll discover Chicago and Illinois with her. You'll hear about Jackie's experience with tornadoes, learn the nuances of the Chicago accent, you'll hear about the food, and you'll get a local's perspective on how to make the most out of your next trip to Chicago. This is a fun one. Let's do it. Hi, everybody. My name is Shauna, and this is the American English Podcast. My goal here is to teach you the English spoken in the United States through common expressions, pronunciation tips, and interesting cultural snippets or stories. I hope to keep this fun, useful, and interesting. Let's do it. Hi, everybody. We're here today with Jackie Katzis. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Perfect. Yes.
Or Jacqueline, I found. Is that your full name?
Yeah, Jacqueline, but I don't ever really go by Jacqueline.
Cool. So Jackie is here right now. She is an English teacher originally from Chicago, Illinois, but you have lived around the world. You speak multiple languages. I want to get to know you, and I want to get to know where you're from, which is an area I'm not too familiar with, if I'm going to be honest.
That's okay.
Yeah. So how are you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm actually impressed that we're on the same time zone, because I was thinking that for you it would be super early in the morning. But
Nope. I'm now in North Carolina on the East Coast, and you are in Florida at the moment, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I am curious to know a little bit about your background. Do you mind telling me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, I was born, I say Chicago, but it was Chicago suburbs. And so one thing that's different, I spent a lot of time in Brazil, and I know your husband is also Brazilian. The suburbs in Brazil are very different than the suburbs in the States. So typically, like in Sao Paulo or Rio, the suburbs, or like the periphery, I guess would be the translation. Those are maybe not the most expensive areas to live. They're not the most desirable areas to live. And actually in the US, it's the opposite. So when you grow up in the suburbs, it's typically very family friendly, has really good schools, safer than the big cities.
Right.
So there's just that little difference there. But I grew up in the west suburbs of Chicago. Mm-hmm. And then, I had a pretty, I guess, normal upbringing. And then I went to school at the University of Iowa. And then I did my master's in Chicago, downtown Chicago. And then I worked there for a while. And then I had a bit of a existential crisis and went to Brazil.
Oh, I'm curious to hear about that.
Yes.
How did that? So you had an existential crisis. Was it too cold? What caused you to go to Brazil? Because those are very different places.
I know. And it's one of those things that it's like, who knows why we end up on the path that we end up. But I do think it's really interesting when we do look back and we see like all the little signs that were there all along. So to backtrack a little bit. So I studied Spanish at the University of Iowa. I studied abroad in Spain for a semester. And when I graduated, I started working as a Spanish teacher. And I really liked learning Spanish and that whole process, but I didn't exactly love teaching Spanish. And I think a lot of it is because I was insecure about it not being my native language. So I relate a lot to other English teachers that are teaching English, and they also have those insecurities because they feel like, oh, my pronunciation is a little bit different, or I have an accent, or, there's a lot of things.
Foreign teachers of English then, like Brazilians teaching English or like French people
Yes.
teaching English. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Gotcha.
and what's so funny is on the weekends when I was working as a Spanish teacher, but on the weekends I would volunteer as an ESL teacher it was called Erie Neighborhood House. It was
Gotcha.
just like, I don't know, it's just like a little community center in a Hispanic neighborhood of Chicago. And I would go there on Saturdays and I would help people for free as a volunteer. I would help them learn English. And I loved this. Like I gave up my weekends to do this, but for whatever reason, it never crossed my mind to do that as a job. I don't know why.
I find that it's very uncommon to meet outside of the internet, outside of YouTube, just native English speakers teaching ESL. Like it's just weird. It's just not something that comes up in conversation. So I see what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that's something for us to just be more aware of. Like, what am I doing for free that I really love? Or what am I doing for fun? And maybe just think about that career path. But instead, I was like, no, I'm going to do school counseling. That'll be the next step. And I got my master's in school counseling. And then I worked for Chicago Public Schools for a while, first as a Spanish teacher, then as a school counselor. And I think that's when the quote unquote existential crisis hit me. It was, I had done all those steps. You graduate high school, you go to college, you get your degree, you get a job, you get your master's degree, you get a better job. And I still felt like this is not what I want to be doing for the rest of my life.
Right.
And I was the youngest person in my department at the school that I was working at by far. I mean, there was a few people that were maybe a little bit older than me, but then a lot of people who were quite a bit older than me.
Right.
And it kind of gave me a glimpse of my future. And
that's interesting.
Yeah. And to be honest, it wasn't like, oh, this is horrible, but it just wasn't really what I wanted for myself. And I also found myself like wishing away the time, like counting down the days to the weekend, counting down the months until my next break, counting down the years until my retirement. And I was in my 20s to retire. And I'm like, I don't want to be wishing away my life. You know?
Well,
like,
it sounds like you have a bit of the entrepreneurial spirit in you. I mean, for someone to go from that sort of job into going on YouTube, putting yourself out there in the world, sounds like the existential crisis made sense.
It did. It made sense. It didn't feel like it made sense at the time. It was kind of one of those things like, what's wrong with you? Like, you've got the best job and you're living in this great city and the checklist is all checked off, but you can just feel like inside that I just felt this pull. Like I really wanted to spend more time, especially in South America, which I didn't really know much about South America. And so I just decided to take like a year. It's like, no, I'm going to take a year off. And this was before I had children or I wasn't in a serious relationship. So I decided now is the time to go and be risky, because the only person I'm putting at risk is myself. Like,
for me, at least, the only regrets I have are things that I don't do. If I do something, then it's like, that was a choice in that moment. And this is what I get from it, But I feel like those regrets that you have from not doing something are the ones that really hang over your head. That you'll carry on for years on end, and you just got to do it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I have this visual of myself as like this 80, 90-year-old lady looking back on my life being like, what would you regret more? Staying where it's safe and comfortable, even though you feel like something's not right, or just throwing yourself out there a little bit and living life, taking some risks. And it was so clear to me, like, just take the risk, see what happens.
So you spent then 10 years in Brazil after that?
So I didn't plan.
I saw, you have, I think what was the website? It was like Stardom, like famous people stardom something.com, and it's like Jacqueline Katz's.
Gosh, so funny.
And it says like you met your husband 2 weeks after moving there.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Oh, this is all like on a website?
Yeah. I
How
found
crazy.
it. You are on the internet, girl.
I know I'm on the internet. Some of the stuff I find is pretty interesting. Like I see stuff like net worth and I'm like, ooh, what is this gonna say? I'm like, where are they getting this information from? But
like, as long as they don't know, like, where you live, right? Because that
right.
can be
Well, I'm sure that
concern.
information is out there too. It's hard nowadays to be anonymous. But yeah, I definitely do not consider myself a famous person at all. So it is,
funny.
it's comical to see this stuff on the internet. Cause I'm like, it's almost like a different person. I don't even know.
You're funny. You're very accomplished.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
But I went to Brazil basically because my friend who decided to come with me, she really wanted to go to Brazil. Mm-hmm. So for me, I spoke Spanish, so I thought it would make more sense to go someplace where I could actually communicate. But she said, no, let's start in Brazil. And we actually traveled to Brazil for about a week for Carnival the year before we moved.
Yeah. It was like a test run.
Yeah. I was like, let's test it out, see what we think. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And it's so funny for me to like look back and remember that time when I came as like the total gringa, not understanding anything, just soaking it all in, with those like fresh eyes. And I met so many amazing people. And then after that trip, my friend and I decided that we wanted to take maybe a year off, 6 months to a year. So that's when I left my job and we kind of went on a one-way ticket and we were open. We thought we would start in Brazil and then go all over South America, just see what happens. But we ended up staying. I met my husband 2 weeks after I landed and I started working as an English teacher, which I loved so much. I remember thinking, oh, I cannot believe I'm like being paid. And I was not being paid much at all. Very little.
About the experience.
It was just so great, like working with adults and people that really wanted to learn and were so interested in the culture. And I felt like I was actually learning even more from them. Just, I would correct their English and help them, but just learning about the culture and their work and just the everyday lives.
It's a real connection there.
Yes.
As you probably know, my husband is Brazilian. I was his English teacher. And I always tell people, I'm like, if you're looking for a partner, consider looking for a language teacher because you get on such a deep level very fast, Yeah. Like I want to practice the third conditional. Let's like talk about regrets in your life. And like, you dive so deep.
Yes.
That
it's like therapy.
It's just, exactly.
It really is.
So you're originally from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
What is the term? Are you a Chicagoan or
Chicagoan?
Chicagoan. And Illinois, I have no idea. Would you be an Illinois?
Illinoisan? Honestly, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say I'm an Illinoisan. I just say I'm from Illinois. But it's interesting because Illinois outside of Chicago is very rural. So, I guess there are a couple. It's suburbs and maybe there's a couple cities, but even so, they're more like agricultural cities.
Gotcha.
Or just small towns, lots of cornfields.
So do you feel like growing up, and I'm not sure how the Midwest plays into this, like Midwest culture and stuff, but do you feel like your upbringing there has impacted just who you are and like your relationship with, Brazilians and your husband? Do you see a lot of differences between you and him, for example?
Yes. Yeah. So I grew up, in the suburbs of Chicago, and there's a lot of advantages to that because you're very close to the city. So all of our field trips, we would go to the museums downtown. Our prom, like the high school prom, we did like a little boat, like a cruise on Lake Michigan. And so there was a lot of really cool things just because we were so close to the city. You can take advantage of all the arts and museums and the sporting events, like all that stuff is right there. So you get like a good taste of big city life with a little bit of separation. So you're still in like your suburban bubble of like safety and everyone's
Gotcha.
kind of the same. But my dad and my mom, when I was, I think like 6 or 7 years old, they bought a farm out in like more like Western Illinois, Western part of Illinois.
Wow.
So on the weekends, we would also go out to the farm a lot. So they had like a horse farm with all different kinds of animals and things like that. And I started riding horses and spending a lot of time on the
Wow.
farm when I was in like second grade. And that became a huge part of my life all the way through up until about high school. And then in high school, you're just with your friends and that's it.
Right.
So I had this like mix of city farm growing up, which is kind of unique. I guess I consider myself a little bit of a chameleon in some ways that I can easily adapt to a lot of different environments. And it could have been because of my upbringing, but I also think it's just part of who I am because I'm the only one. I'm the oldest of four, and we're like 4 kids in 5 years. So we're very close in age,
Wow.
but I'm the only one that had any interest in learning another language or studying abroad or even leaving Chicago. So I don't know. There's things that we're just kind of born with that we can't
Gotcha.
explain.
So like the area around your farm, looking online, I see that there's a lot of soy production. There's a lot of it's just big agricultural communities in the Midwest up there. Do you have any connection to, I'm just trying to get an idea of like Chicago. Do you guys feel so separate from that lifestyle in general, or is that agriculture like an integral part of the state?
So I really think it depends on where you live, but I think there's a definite separation. Like there's people who are like city people and they don't know anything about farming and that type of stuff. And then there's people like when I went to school in Iowa, like I obviously met a lot of people from Iowa and Nebraska who grew up in really small towns and farming communities. But yeah, I think there is a pretty big difference. Like it's not so common to meet people who are both.
Okay.
But I do think people can like both. But there's such different lifestyles.
Right.
For sure.
It's interesting here in Asheville. Sunday we went to the party and everybody that was from North Carolina there grew up on farms. And it was so unique for me because it's so rare in my area of California to meet someone that grew up on a farm. And they were talking about shearing sheep and things that I'm like, wow, that hasn't been a conversation ever for me. Right. But it was so fascinating, just how there are truly so many different lifestyles in the United States. I mean, from one state to the next within the same state, like Illinois. It's just fascinating. And I actually read, and I'm curious if this is true. So in the Midwest, you guys have Tornado Alley, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you have what do they call it? Underneath the house, the shelter, a storm shelter sort of thing?
So we had basements. It's very, like here in Florida, I think because it's like a flood plain, you can't dig too deep. You'll hit water right away.
Right.
Or do they call it a floodplain? I can't remember the word for that. It's pretty hard to be able to have a basement just because of the soil.
Right.
But in the Midwest, it's like a lot of clay, I guess is the soil. And it's not swampy like it is here. So almost everybody, I can't think of anybody that didn't have a basement. So it's like almost like an extra extension of your house because it's the same size of your house a lot of times. Yeah. And it's just this extra big space room. But a lot of it is because of tornadoes as well. So if there's a tornado, you would hear the siren going off and it's just like, and then
it does happen in Chicago.
Yeah, not so much in the city. I mean, it has happened in the city, but usually it goes, Tornado Alley kind of goes around the city of Chicago. It's more like rural areas that Tornado Alley passes through. And I'm not even sure if like where we lived in the suburbs is technically like in Tornado Alley, but we did have tornadoes.
Okay.
I mean, I can remember several times when we had to go into the basement, and there were a few times when, like out by my parents' farm, there was damage, like a shed was just like picked up and thrown.
Like, like in The Wizard of Oz.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Oh my goodness. And so sirens went off. What sort of, are these sirens on top of buildings or like what?
I don't even know. I think maybe they're from even like a local fire station or something like that. I don't even know exactly where they come from. It was just what we knew. Like that's the tornado siren. You just have to take cover. And I mean, it's crazy when a tornado happens, at least what I remember, it's been a while. Yeah. It gets so still right before it kind of comes through. Like you go outside, it's like silent, very silent. There's like no wind whatsoever.
It's like a vacuum
and then something. All of a sudden, things start picking up, but it's like really eerie almost. It's like, oh my gosh, there's like nothing.
Oh, man. So have you seen one then?
I haven't seen one. And I think just because I've been like usually in the basement or something like that when I haven't been outside.
Not a storm watcher.
Chase them. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Storm chaser. Is that tornado chaser? Isn't that a thing?
Yeah. But I've seen, trees down and some people lose like the roof of their house or stuff like that. But
that's nuts. And in your basement, did you have a lot of stored food, canned food?
Yeah. So a tornado usually passes over fairly quickly. So I don't think we had anything for that purpose.
That'd be more in hurricane, like now where you're at, right?
Yes. Yeah. Where we're at, you kind of prepare for stuff. But even a hurricane, it's like, I mean, the damage could last a few days. I guess that's true. Like if you don't have a generator or something like that, like stuff that needs to be refrigerated could easily go bad. But it'll pass through quickly, in minutes or hours, depending on how big it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't take like days, but it could, be raining for days, or if a lot of trees are down and power is out, it could take days for that to get back up.
Right. That's fascinating. Yeah. So sorry to hop from one thing to the other,
okay.
But there's a lot of things when I think of culture. Obviously, food plays a huge role.
Yeah.
And Chicago, I mean, has two things I know of that are very famous. Do you mind talking a little bit about the food? And then I can chime in with anything I know, which is probably very little.
Yeah. And actually, one quick thing about the tornadoes that I wanted to mention is at school, like we would do tornado drills where they would have like the practice siren. And then we would all have to go on the floor and usually like along the walls of the classroom, so that if a window got blown in, the glass would blow over you. So
fascinating.
And then you would just crouch down in like a fetal position and put your hands over your head.
Against the walls?
And that was like against the walls. Like your head facing like the wall. And then you go into the fetal position, hands over your head, and just wait there. So we would do that drill every year at school.
That is important information. So we had earthquake drills growing up, and it was always the siren would go off, and then we would have to run underneath the desk because it was if things fall down, you have to be not get hit in the head from that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. The debris. Yeah.
That's funny. Natural disasters across the U.S.
All the crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But about the food, I think Chicago's is well known for deep dish pizza.
Mm-hmm.
The Chicago style hot dog is pretty popular, and like Italian beef sandwiches.
Okay.
There's also like popcorn and things like that. But I think those are like the three things that I think are kind of typical of Chicago.
Okay. And what's your go-to? Like, do you love food from there? Is it something that you look for out in Florida?
No, I mean, no, I don't typically look for it. Deep dish pizza, I personally don't really like. It's just too thick. I prefer thin crust pizza. A Chicago hot dog is really good. It's definitely good. And like Italian beefs, there's like Portillo's, which is a pretty famous chain restaurant. And I do think Portillo's opened here in Orlando. And I know people from the Chicago area are very excited
out
to
in
get
line waiting for it.
their hot dog and their Italian beef fix.
Yeah. Culture tip. A Chicago-style pizza is usually just called a deep dish pizza. Like its name, it's baked in a deep, round pan. The crust is usually thicker than a traditional New York-style pizza. Usually there are more toppings, chunky tomato sauce. It's a filling meal. A Chicago-style hot dog is a beef hot dog on a poppy seed bun. But what's very specific about it is the toppings. Chicago-style hot dogs usually have mustard, relish, celery salt, chopped onions, sliced tomatoes, a pickle spear, and peppers. Sport peppers, to be specific. So they're medium in heat and sort of tangy. Different, huh? Italian beef, number 3, is a classic Chicago street food. And basically, it's thinly sliced roast beef on an Italian roll or baguette. And it's usually served wet or dipped in gravy. So gravy is juice that comes off of beef. It's like a broth almost. And some people will get their whole sandwich dipped. Others will just get it wet, so they might have a splash of sauce on the top. Then, of course, there's some sweet peppers, maybe some pickled veggie mix that they call giardiniera, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And yeah, so that is the Italian beef. Back to the show. Jackie, I'm curious about accent. I have an idea of a Chicago accent. I don't know if it's true. You sound the same as me, at least from from this time that we've spoken. Is there a Chicago accent?
So, yes, there is. And that's a really good question. I think because I've been teaching English for a long time and I've been living abroad and things like that, my accent has gotten much smoother or not as strong. But I would say what identifies a Chicago accent is typically the A's and the O's. So, for example, mom, like my mom,
Oh, wow.
so that like hot dog. It's like the
Oh, wow.
Chicago.
I love that.
It's kind of. Hang on, let me turn it on real quick.
Can you say that again? I love that.
Like mom,
Ma'am?
mom, and
Mom.
actually that's how I do say it. Like if I call my mom, I'm like, hey mom, mom. My
That's so
dad, it's more like ah. Yeah. So I think like Jackie is it's kind of like a stronger, more dramatic A, and the O sounds like an A. And I remember when I went to the West Coast when I was 18, I did this like outward bound trip where we did camping and whitewater rafting. And I was with a bunch of people from the West Coast. And that was my first time like ever being with people that were not from the Chicago area. And they were all laughing so hard because I was talking about my socks. My socks were wet.
Love that.
And I was saying like my bag, like my sleeping bag. And they were like, oh my gosh, your accent is so strong. And to me, I was like, what?
Right.
I don't have an accent. Like, what are you talking about?
Wait. So let's just go through these. So you said, I'd say mom. You say?
Mom.
I say hot dog. You say?
Hot dog.
I say bag.
Bag.
Okay.
Pretty
And
similar.
socks?
Socks.
Yeah. Can you guys hear the
Socks.
difference?
It's just
in
more
those?
like Yeah. Or like the book is on the table.
Yeah, on the table. Or Chicago. How do you say Chicago?
Chicago.
Chicago. Yeah, it's got the
It's like more
a little bit.
open.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's amazing. I love that. I it's so fun hearing the different accents, and I do think that like being elsewhere kind of diminishes it because
It's true.
I didn't even notice during our conversation that any word that was particularly different.
Right. And I notice it even in myself that I don't think I speak with an accent that much
Yeah.
anymore. But when I spend a lot of time, like with my friends and family, then it comes out more for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Fun.
So
Love
funny.
It. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So if you were to go back to Chicago now, how would you spend, like if you had 3 days there, how would you spend those 3 days to have like the ultimate experience?
Okay. All my family, well, my sister actually, she and her family, they moved out to California a couple years ago because of her husband's work. But originally from Chicago, and I have a really big family. So my cousins and my grandma, who's going to be 100 next week, she's
Congrats
still
to
there.
her.
My aunts and uncles, like everybody is there. So when I go back, I visit family a lot and friends. If I were going like as a tourist, because some people are going for the first time, I highly, highly recommend doing an architecture tour. So Chicago architecture is beautiful, and they have tours that you get on the Chicago River. So it's just like a boat tour, and they explain everything, and you just kind of sit there and take it all in and learn about the history and the architecture. It's really, really a great thing to do.
Who's the architect? Geary? Is that Frank Geary that did a lot of the stuff
There's
there?
Frank Lloyd Wright, who
Frank
did a
Lloyd
lot.
Wright, yes.
Yeah, especially in the suburb of Oak Park.
Okay.
He has, there's some homes that are very easily identifiable as like Frank Lloyd Wright homes. And I don't know much about architecture at all, but it's very, very beautiful. And just learning about the history and what the buildings were originally used for and what they are now. It's
amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I just watched a TED Talk about architecture because I did a recent episode on home improvement, and it's crazy how architecture impacts our like emotional experience.
Yes.
You know, so you see something and it just makes your day better if it looks
so
good.
True. It's so true.
Anyway.
That's why I'm like, and I need to clean my house.
Oh gosh, me too. So sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. I think Chicago's got a really great music scene. They're known for like jazz and blues. Kingston Mines is a place that I used to go to. They would have live blues music, and you can just, any type of interest that you have, you can easily find it. Chicago's very similar to New York City. I went to New York a month or two ago, and I felt like I was in Chicago, but just a confusing version because I know my way around Chicago really well. Like, it looks very similar, but I don't know where I am.
Yeah. So a tourist should see the architecture. They should go to like a jazz club to get the feeling of the blues or jazz music.
Or jazz,
And then what else would you recommend doing? Other than Portillo's, you said too, right?
Yeah,
for food?
Portillo's is good for food. I think the hot dogs and the Italian beefs. I mean, there's like Michigan Avenue for shopping. There's Millennium Park that has like that famous bean.
Right.
It's like that silver bean that you can kind of see all different like reflected parts of the city.
Is that what that's about? I was wondering.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of random.
I'm like, is it just because you're growing beans there? I actually haven't looked into it.
Yeah, no, I think the way it's shaped is that you capture, it reflects different, you can see like the clouds in the sky, you see the lake, you see the buildings behind it, you get all kinds of like little different images of the city.
Isn't the name is Cloud Gate, right? Of the bean, the official name?
Oh, I don't even know. To me, it's just the bean.
Oh, the bean. Okay. Yeah. I think, that's probably the easiest.
Yeah. There's a lot to do. I mean, when I lived there, I would just leave my apartment and just walk around all day long without a plan. And there's always like street festivals and little coffee shops and just, random street performers, or there's always stuff going on.
Okay.
That is just kind of a fun surprise. Farmers markets, like art galleries. There's
everything.
Lots of cool things. Yeah.
And when would you go there? Do you think it's like April to, I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm guessing summer.
I would avoid the winter season unless you really like extreme cold and wind. But this year it actually hasn't even been that bad. But most of the time, the winter is kind of rough, I think. Yeah, April all the way through October, I would say would be probably the best time to go.
I had a list of rapid fire questions for you, but I asked most of them. So here's just one last one. Why do you live in Florida now?
Okay, that is a good question. So when we decided to leave Brazil, we were kind of all over the place because when you have an online business, you you have the freedom to live wherever you want in the world, which is amazing. But sometimes having all those options makes you a little bit crazy, because then it's like, well, what if this is a better option? Or what if this is a better option? It's like the decision making fatigue and overwhelm is very real. We didn't want to go back to Chicago, not because I don't like Chicago. I do love Chicago, but we wanted someplace different. And we were between Colorado and Florida, which are two very different places.
But they're the hot places to be. I always hear people, oh no, I want to move close to Denver, or I want to move. Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Yeah. And so we visited Colorado a number of times. We really loved it there. We were pretty set on going to Colorado, but then we went there in the winter time and we're like, oh,
and you're like, I don't want that again.
Like, man, I've been spoiled living in Brazil for the past 10 years. This is going to be hard. And logistically, where we are here in Florida, it's very close to Brazil. We go back and forth a lot. It's very easy to get to Chicago too. My parents have a place on the beach here in Florida, so they come down a lot.
Perfect.
So logistically, this is a good place to be. Weather-wise, it's a good place to be. It's very Brazilian. There's a huge Brazilian community here, which was easier on all of us, actually, not just my husband and my kids, but my oldest, he was 8 when we moved. He just turned 13.
Teenager.
Yes. But for him, he really wanted to be where there's other Brazilians, because he didn't want to feel like, like a foreigner.
Yeah. So he grew up there then.
Yeah. Oh, so he was in 3rd grade when we moved to Florida. Mm-hmm. So he did all of his schooling, and he didn't go to a bilingual school. It was a Brazilian school. Yeah. But I always spoke with him and his brother in English. So they always knew how to speak it. Yeah. But when he came here, and he did fine. He spoke English perfectly. Yeah. Nobody even knew he spoke another language. But he told me there was some vocabulary that he was missing, obviously, just because he's not living in it.
Right. But that is true about I mean, last time I went to Florida, I just felt like, wow, I could be in like a little town of Brazil with all these, with the amount of Portuguese and Spanish speakers there. It's nuts.
Oh, yeah.
So you get an opportunity to practice on a regular basis,
every day, all day. I was just at Starbucks yesterday, and I was looking around the Starbucks, and every single person in the Starbucks was speaking Portuguese.
And do they recognize you? Like,
sometimes people do. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, so I just kind of do my thing. But sometimes people will be like, "Oh, are you Jackie?" and say hi, or sometimes they'll want to take a picture.
How fun. You're a celebrity.
It's very cute.
So, is there anything else you'd like to share about Illinois, Chicago, yourself?
Yeah, I think everyone should go visit Chicago for sure. If